Hold on. Looks like we are on the air. Going to roll with audio. Audio is rolling. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey guys, no intro today because I am in a motel, as you can probably see or hear. I'm wearing one of those crazy gamer headsets, and Mitch was also having some technical difficulties, so we're both kind of in a weird spot today. But we have DSLR Film new podcast for you today. Mitch, what have you been up to, man?
Hey, DJ, great to be here. I'm excited to see your hotel room there. It looks awesome. I have been busy preparing for this thing called NAB. Ever heard of it? Yeah.
Oh, it's that's right around the corner next week, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm so lost in my own shuffle that I forgot that NAB is coming.
Yeah, this crazy thing called the NAB is coming up this coming Monday. So lots of announcements have already come out. We're trying to find all of them and get them covered for you guys. And of course, we're going to talk more about that later.
Well, let's go ahead and jump into the news because my situation is not exciting. If you like hotels, that's where I'm at. Long-term stay. I'm lucky I have a small kitchenette next to me. So
there you
go.
Woohoo!
Anyway, on down the line here. The first thing that's pretty interesting and fairly exciting, and we've heard rumors about this for quite a while. The Canon XC10. This small little camera is going to set you back about $2,400. Mitch, you know a lot about this, and you've been looking into it and following all the trends. It looks like this is a fixed lens camera. Weren't we talking earlier about this possibly being an interchangeable lens camera?
Yes, we were, as a matter of fact. We really hoped it was going to be. The early announcements, quote unquote, from China, the people that were there posting about it and showed us the photos said that they told us that it was going to have a PL mount and an EF mount. Well, lo and behold, when it finally gets announced by Canon this past week, bing, it's a fixed lens. And so that really kind of irritated a lot of people, at least in the filmmaking community. Now, one of the things that you have to be aware of, and I've said this already on a couple of different podcasts and things I've been invited to, is that if you're pissed off about this camera, you are obviously not the target market. Canon has released this camera. It's actually a hybrid because it not only does stills and video, but it does stills and video. That's what I really meant is the hybrid. My little "and" got thrown in there kind of wrong. But so it does take stills. It does 12 megapixel stills as well as 4K video. The thing that pisses most of the people off is that fixed lens, and it's got a 10 times zoom on it, and it's really looking to be a fairly interesting camera. But for our filmmakers, it's not the right target market, right? It's got a 1-inch sensor, so it's smaller than the APS-C, obviously smaller than a full frame camera. So you're not going to get the incredible depth of field. I mean, basically, this is a prosumer or a news professional, maybe. I've seen reports. I was looking at DP Review and Engadget, and they're kind of excited about it because it gives them a really small form factor to be able to take a camera, to take stills and video. They don't have to worry about multiple lenses. Canon says that it's lighter than a DSLR. Now, I don't know how light the lens itself is. And so there are people that are excited about it, especially like in the news community. And the last group of people that are apparently excited about it are people who fly drones. And apparently, you obviously are going to have a larger drone in order to be able to lift this. But if it's lighter than a DSLR, it could be very appealing to the drone market. So there are a lot of people who are excited about it and a lot of people who think that Canon has really missed the boat. My point to those people, if you were looking for a GH4 competitor, this is not it. Obviously, this is not what they would release. And of course, this is a video camera. Let's remember that NAB is a video-centric conference. And so Canon's not going to release a GH4 competitor, for example, at a video-centric conference. They're going to release it later on when they release their normal DSLR stuff. So,
well, I'm looking at the XC10 right now, Mitch, and you're talking about video cameras, and if you think about this in terms of Canon's old video line, they had the 300 series and they had the 100 series, and those were 2/3 inch sensor cameras, and they had a super zoom on them. And where did they get used? Well, they got used a lot at sporting events, news coverage. They got used for very indie projects with lens adapters and so on, and various other things. This looks like it's an evolution of those cameras at a cheaper price, because I believe when the 300 series came out, that was a $3,000, maybe $4,000 camera. And I'm not talking about the 300 series, the new Canon C300. I'm talking about the original 300 series with a fixed lens and a 2/3 inch sensor. This has a 1-inch sensor, so you're getting a little bit better depth of field out of it. It has a very good zoom. And it's using, it looks like a somewhat new codec, up to 305 megs per second in 4K mode. So you might get better resolution out of this than you do out of something like the GH4. But the question here is, does this shoot RAW for your stills, or does it just shoot JPEG? Because when I was watching that video, they said beginner, just starting out, beginner, just starting out, a number of times in the Canon promo video. So even though this feels like a good tool for news people, it seems like they're kind of saying, well, $2,400, you don't have to buy a lens, you don't have to buy a 5D Mark III or a GH4 and a bunch of stuff. So this is the alternative method.
Right. It's kind of a low end kind of thing, right? Most news pros are shooting with DSLRs, and they have a variety of lenses already. So it's kind of more of a startup thing, or like you said, an event thing, a sporting event maybe. And the answer to your question is no, it does not do RAW stills. It only does JPEGs. But if you look at some of the people, for example, I was just reading an article the other day about one of the guys who shoots like the Olympics. I mean, he shoots pro level stills, and he shoots JPEGs. He doesn't want to slow himself down with shooting RAW images. And in order to get the images quickly out, they don't want to do all the conversion. I mean, but it slows the process down. If you're comparing a 23 megapixel raw image versus a much smaller JPEG, for example, you can do a lot more work. And so most of those pros maybe are already shooting JPEGs and they don't care about RAW. So
now, what is the low light level capabilities for this guy? Because I'm seeing 100 to 20,000 ISO. Is this 1-inch sensor any good in kind of that more live event, bad light coverage sort of area?
That's a dang good question, because I've been shooting in a lot of high school gymnasiums lately, and the lighting sucks. I can't wait for somebody to start upgrading some of these gyms. I don't know. We'll obviously have to test it out to see. Typically, the higher size, the larger sized sensors tend to have better low light capabilities, but Canon's obviously been working on this. They think there's a market for it. I mean, again, I've seen a lot of complaining on Planet 5D, for example, about this camera, and I'm like, you guys are not the target market. Maybe I shouldn't have even posted anything. Most of the readers tend to say that's not a camera that appeals to them. I'm like, yes, it doesn't appeal to you, but you're not the market. So people tend to think that it's just, it's a 4K video camera, so it must be for me, right? And it's not. It's not targeted at most of you people. So, but it is a good conversation, and we should talk about the. And I am not a codec guy. Canon also announced this new XF-AVC codec.
Yeah. And they're labeling it as an MFX H.264 wrapped codec. And I know they've used some sort of like Canon proprietary, and I believe it was labeled MFX in their previous video cameras, their higher end level ones from the last generation. So maybe is that the same thing that they're using in this?
I apologize. I don't know all of the technical details, and I'm not a codec guy, but they have said in the press release, for example, that this new quote unquote new wrapper is going to do a lot better job of taking that 4K video and compressing it so that it looks great maybe especially when you compress it down to 1080, for example. But it's obviously not H.265, which is when Hugh wrote the article for us at Planet 5D, he was asking whether it was competitor for H.265. It's obviously not that, but there's certainly a lot of things that are going to come out at NAB. I've been looking at a couple of press releases about H.265 and up-res capabilities. Very impressed by press release that came out, and since I had to reboot my machine, I've lost it. It's not here right now, but maybe I can find that later. There are companies that are doing upresing of 1080 up to 4K. You and I have talked a lot about that in the past, about where's the content going to come from or come for 4K usage. And maybe what's going to happen is that we're going to end up seeing a lot of upresing going on, and people will still deliver content maybe in 1080 and have the hardware on the user consumer side that does the upresing, and therefore we don't have to build bigger pipes, and we'll still get 4K out there faster than we would if we had to rebuild the whole infrastructure.
Well, we're kind of running into an issue anyway with 4K, because right now a lot of the special effects pipelines are 2K, and they're not actually using, even if they're capturing in 4K or 6K, they're not doing any of their post-processing in 4K because it's just too CPU intensive. They can't handle all of the CGI effects that they're adding to feature-length films these days at that resolution. And so upresing is sort of an option for the people who can't afford that sort of effects pipeline. And I know I can't, and most other people can't as well, even all the way up to full-fledged, fully funded feature-length films that are winning awards left and right. Those guys are still in the 2K mode and not working their way up to 4K yet. So you're a little bit bigger than 1080p, you scale up, you add some post-processing, and I've actually seen some of the up-res stuff that's available and watched it in 4K, and it looks pretty good. I mean, I don't know what secret magic they're doing in the background to add pixels or whatever, but you're watching it on your couch from 10 feet away, you're probably going to be happy with what you're getting out of that.
Exactly. And I think that's really the key in much of this that's coming down the pipe. And we're certainly going to be looking at that at NAB next week. But with the infrastructure we have now, we've got to have some other tools and things like H.265 and these upraise capabilities. Shoving more stuff down the current pipes we have is going to be the quick and easy answer. Most people aren't going to even notice the difference.
Now, moving on to something you would actually need to work on 4K footage, I've got the Intel 750 PCIe SSD. This guy is capable of 2.6 gig per second reads. That's 2.6 gig. In the past, when you're talking about SSDs, you're talking about megs, like 600 megs, 500 megs, or limits of SATA 3 or SATA 6, excuse me. This guy is really fast, and it bypasses the normal SATA lanes and goes straight to your PCIe slot. And it is available for $400, which is about $1 a gig in the 400 gig model, or $800 for the 1.2 terabyte model. Basically, this is the fastest consumer grade SSD you can get on the market for reads and writes. If you're working on 4K footage, this thing is probably where you're going to go if you have 4, 5, 6 streams in your timeline. Mitch, have you moved to SSDs completely, or have you gotten any into your kit yet? I know we've talked about them before, but you weren't sure if you wanted one or not.
I have, in my new iMac, I have the Fusion drive, which is the hybrid of an SSD with 125 gigs, I think, and the rest of it is all physical hard drive. So that works really well for what I'm doing on my iMac, especially if you've got a lot of extra RAM.
Yeah.
My laptop is actually 125 gigabyte MacBook Pro 15, and I've had that for about 4 years. And I tell you, I won't switch. I won't go back to a totally hard drive existence on my computers because they're just blazing fast, especially since my laptop only has 4 gigabytes of RAM. And why I did that, I don't know. But even because I know, RAM's critical to making anything work. But even when I have several applications open and I'm monitoring how much RAM is in use, and it's like crazy, it's all busy, because it's all SSD based. The swapping when I switch from one app to another is not very tedious. Much better than when I was using a hard drive based laptop. So yes, I love SSDs in that regard. I have not changed all of my external drives to be SSDs because they're still pretty dang expensive. But I won't go back to an internal hard drive on a computer ever again. That's for sure.
Well, for those of you, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, the Intel 750 PCIe SSD, there's a great article over at pcper.com. Check that out. There's links to that in the show note. But if you have Windows 8.1 or higher, this does allow you to boot directly from your PCIe slot, so you don't have to worry about that whole incompatibility thing or loading drivers ahead of time. This thing is by far the fastest. You pay $1 a gig versus, I believe, 30 cents a gig for most other drives. So it's something to consider if you want all the speed in the world. Otherwise, you might want to wait. As Mitch said, the prices are dropping. They're still pretty expendy for most SSDs. This is one of the most spendy consumer grade SSDs, but keep an eye out, because I'm sure this will force competitors to drop the price lower. On to other wacky stuff. We've got the Nikon 1J5 mirrorless camera. This is a 4K capable, basically sort of micro four thirds-esque 1-inch sensor. Looks like it's using the Sony sensor from the FDR AX100. The crazy thing about this is, first of all, it shoots 4K, but it only shoots 4K at 14.99 frames per second, which... Yeah, exactly. What are they thinking? I don't know. Why even have 4K? This is like the Hero 3 Black Edition, where you're like, oh, well, great, and I have 4K, but it's only 12 or 15 frames per second. Sweet, what am I going to do with that? The other weird thing about this guy is that it shoots 20 frames per second in stills mode. So that part is actually fairly compelling.
What?
Imagine following a skateboarder around and just, I don't know. It's blowing my mind here. You can pick this guy up for $500. Mitch, what do you think about this? This is a different lens mount than Nikon's normal mounts. It's called the Nikon 1, and they do have an adapter that goes to the full-fledged Nikkor mount lenses, but there's a surprising number of lenses available for this particular mount. It's not micro four thirds. It's a special Nikon thing. Would you invest $500 plus lenses on this guy?
Well, you know what my answer is going to be.
It's going to be no. I'm guessing no.
No, but I'm not the target market. Again, it's really critical to realize what the target market of something like this is. There are lots of people that are using smaller cameras that are going to eat this up. It's bigger than a compact. It's not as big as a DSLR. It's probably even smaller than a quote unquote mirrorless, right? So
yeah,
it will appeal to a certain segment of the market, and Canon and Nikon are obviously now looking at other markets, with the compact camera market kind of crushing due to the iPhones and smartphones and all those kind of different usages of the smarter technology. They got to find a way to sell cameras somehow, and this looks like a particular camera for a particular market. Obviously, the 15 frames per second is not going to float anybody's boat for the 4K side. It's not that much lower than 24. If you think about it a little bit, maybe there can be some interpolation there or some up-resing going on. But it's certainly not going to probably look as good as you would like it to. So 4K, nobody's going to shoot. But there are people shooting 4K with the GoPros, right?
Well, yeah, but the new GoPros are capable of shooting 4K at 30 frames and 24 frames per second. But the old one, basically it had the 2.6K mode, and the 2.6K was able to do regular frame rates, and the 4K wasn't. So for the most part, no one really used that, even though it was available. It was one of those things where they could put 4K on the label of the packaging, but in reality, what does 14 frames per second get you? On the other side, though, the Nikon 1J5, this is the 5th version. They started with the J1. has slowly been creeping up in the market and getting better specs. And if you want to get super telephoto, they have for $996 the Nikon 170-300 lens, and with the crop factor available with this particular body, that it works out to about 189 to 810 millimeter 35 millimeter equivalent. So imagine shooting 20 frames per second at 810 millimeters. You know, you could be shooting wildlife, birds, things across the bay, spying on cheating husbands, whatever you want. This is pretty cool.
Well,
I'm not going to buy it, but man.
Did you? I missed this the first time I read this story because I was skimming. I confess I was skimming. After the first autofocus shot, the camera will shoot in a blazing 60 frames per second.
Yes,
a speed not even a DSLR camera can match.
Well, yeah, and the first frame, it takes 20 frames, slows down the frame shot to focus the system, and then it speeds up to 60. But
that's insane.
The 60, I don't know. I kind of want to see it because with buffering and everything else, can you really go 60 frames in a camera like this before you run out of buffer and you can't write anymore?
How many frames you can get, does it?
Exactly.
So if you can only shoot 1 second, who cares? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because with like even the 7D Mark II, what is it? I think it runs out at about 190 frames at burst mode, and that's 11 frames per second. So this guy, it's a 20 megapixel sensor. Surely it can't outpace the 7D in buffer overwrite. Maybe it can. So 1 second, if you're lucky, maybe half a second or 3/4 a second, but still, that's pretty cool. I mean, I don't know. You could do stop motion type stuff with that. You could do capture. You can make the best animated GIFs in the world.
Yeah. Awesome.
I don't know. Anyway, Nikon's made a pretty sexy package. If you're looking for that sort of old school rangefinder look, the camera is pretty interesting, and $500 for a nice sort of in between the range of micro four thirds and point and shoot. This is a 1-inch sensor. It's something to check out. I'm probably not going to invest in it, but I do kind of want to play with it with some of the crazy zooms that they have available for it and see how it works out. Now, speaking of crazy cameras, we're going from $500 to $1,600 with a Canon 300 or C300 Mark II.
Time out. You said 1,600.
16,000. 16,000. I am completely wrong. It's not 1,600. This is a very pricey camera. Now, before we get into the specs and stuff, one of the things I want to say, because I've heard a lot of people, first thing out of their mouth is, this is way too expensive. And I think you need to get some perspective on pricing for cameras, because imagine a red package about 4 years ago or 5 years ago when the Red 1 and the next generation were available. By the time you got it suited out with batteries, kit, lenses, and everything else, you're talking about $30,000 to $40,000. $16,000 is the base, and people have already collected a bunch of stills lenses that work with this camera. So when you think about $16,000, by the time you kit this out with enough lenses to really be dangerous and a couple of batteries, you're maybe talking $21,000. So if we go forward from pricing about 4 or 5 years ago to today, you're actually sitting more in the range of half the price of those previous cameras. And if you look at the Arri Mini, what is that, 32,000, 38,000? Right. So this is half the price of the Mini. And I'm not going to say it's the exact same specs, but Canon's finally upped the frame rate on this, 120 frames per second. That's nice. You know, they've added 4K internal recording, no external recording boxes. That's nice. It's got incredible low light performance. I mean, that's more than nice. That's freaking awesome. So what do you think, Mitch? You've got more info on this than I do. I see you posted a bunch of specs and stuff down here. What do you think about this guy?
I'm impressed, but the first thing to note, and there is obviously some debate here, the Canon press release that came out 2 days ago, as well as I got a press release today that was a summary kind of thing. Both of those press releases say the price will be around $20,000. Now, the $16,000 price is what is on B&H. If you go over there to pre-order it, They're quoting a price of $15,999,999, whatever that is. So I'm still confused about what the actual pricing is going to be. Now, 20,000 is too high. 15, 16 is about okay, based on what Canon has done before. What would have been really incredible is if they would have done it at 12 to 14,000, people would have really dropped their socks and gone, that's cool. Now, we're talking about Canon here. I understand they're not going to do that kind of pricing, but so I'm still not totally sure whether it's going to be 20K or 16K. You would think that B&H would know the right price, but I don't know. They're also on Passover break, so I don't know. Maybe they messed up.
Now, on that note,
a lot of excitement. What? Go.
On that note for pricing, did you notice how far the original C300 fell in price in the last 3 weeks? It's down to $599 or $5,999, I believe, or $6,020, something like that. So it's dropped from what it was, this price, all the way down to half or less than half. Now, when we see the C300 Mark III, maybe this will fall in half and then it'll be affordable for everybody. That's wishful thinking, I know.
Yeah, you are wishful thinking. And the problem there, and I have to tread lightly, but is Canon's manufactured suggested pricing, or MAP, or whatever their right acronym is, because they have put a lot of pressure on places like B&H and Adorama to hold the pricing. So if Canon says it's going to be $20,000, I'm really surprised that Adorama and those guys are putting a $16,000 price tag out there. What those guys are doing, B&H, and because they're not able to compete on price, is what they'd start doing is making bundles where you can buy the body and a spare lens and a tripod and all these other things to try to get you to perceive the price as being lower, because they're going to throw in all those additions. But it is very curious at how low these prices have gone on the version 1 products. It's pretty astounding.
Yeah, the C100 is now like the go-to for starting, and then you go to the C100 Mark II. Now they have the C300. Do you think they'll be coming out with a C500 Mark II anytime soon?
There is a rumor I've seen about that coming out at NAB, but I'm really surprised that they didn't just go ahead and announce it at the same time they announced the XC10 and the C300 Mark II. So I don't know.
It's kind of weird because this camera basically throws the C500 under the bus.
Right.
It's got better specs than the C500. It's all around a nicer looking camera. So then that kind of means that they either have to do something in their higher end line, or this becomes the flagship and the C500 kind of just goes away.
Exactly. It's very curious. Yeah. It does have some awesome specs though, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm rolling through here right now and looking at these 410 megabits per second in 4K mode. So they must be using some kind of newer codec for that. 422 internal recording at both UHD as well as Ultra HD. Let's see, they've got, oh man, yeah, the frame rates, that's really nice. 4K RAW for an external recorder. I mean, that's not real exciting. That's kind of what was available in the C500 previously. 15 stops of dynamic range.
That's big news.
Log 2. That's good. That everybody wants more dynamic range. Not super excited about the dual pixel CMOS AF autofocus system. And that's weird. Okay, so for those of you not familiar with it, basically Canon skins a layer over the top of their sensor and uses that for contrast detection in AF mode so that you can have on-the-fly autofocus. If you're buying a camera that's $16,000, are you going to have autofocus turned on? I mean, that seems like...
Yes.
You think so?
Now, dual pixel, I mean, you may think of it as contrast-based, but is really, I mean, each pixel has its own ability to, and I'm no good at explaining it. You need to talk to Chuck Westfall to really understand the details. But if you compare it to traditional contrast-based film camcorders and stuff, much better focusing capabilities. The 70D, for example, is pretty dang good at it. Several people I know that are doing the C100 that added the dual pixel technology are really impressed with the way that works. Now, Canon has said in the press release, and of course we've got to talk to them at NAB next week, that they have upped the dual pixel technology in this camera, that it's going to improve the face detection capabilities and the tracking of somebody walking through a frame or whatever. They also have said that it's customizable so that you can decide how fast the tracking is. If somebody's, I mean, the complaint has always been, okay, if I'm in focus and somebody walks behind me, then the sensor kind of goes, oh, look, there's something new, and tracks that. Well, they claim that they've now got this additional capabilities where you can say, ignore other fast tracking objects, just take the one that you're, I don't know all the details yet. They just simply had a little one-line statement in there that you could adjust things like the speed of tracking and other factors in terms of the autofocus. And the third thing they've done with the technology here is that they claim that they have added an overlay. Now, and again, this is a big one that I really want to see at NAB next week, where if you have a manual focus lens, they have some sort of a video overlay in the viewfinder where you can assist your focus. Now, how that's going to work, I don't know. We don't have any clues.
Is this
yet.
going to look like one of the old photo screens where you knew it lined up when the lines came together? I mean, that would be kind of cool.
I don't know. But again, people are constantly bashing Canon, especially like on the DSLRs, because they don't have the zebras and the extra tools that many filmmakers have and need in order to help do focusing, right? Or exposure or all those other things. So here they are adding something to help you do manual focus. And of course, I've heard bitching, oh, that was going to suck. Let's see it first of all. Let's see whether it really works or not. But it's cool that they're trying to add that capability so that if you have a manual focus lens, they will help you focus better, which is what we want, right? I mean, if you watch a video or movie and the actor moves out of focus and you're like, God, that focus puller really sucks, right?
I've had experience with the C100 upgrade and with the version that's available on the, I believe it's the 70 Mark II. And both of those have a bit of hunting issues. And I know that now there was a firmware update after I messed with the C100 that allows some sort of boxing and tracking sort of mechanism. And I haven't used that. Maybe that's a lot better. I don't know for sure, but especially on the DSLR version of the dual pixel system, it still hunts quite a bit and it kind of doesn't know what it's looking for. You can lock it or turn it off and it'll do okay. But this might be better. I hold my reservations on whether or not it's going to be awesome.
Right. We all hold off our reservations. I mean, we get really excited about specs, right? But until you actually see it in implementation. I mean, wasn't it Nikon that first came out and said, well, we've got this brand new autofocus in video on DSLR XYZ. I forgot which one it was. Everybody's like, oh, that's going to be so cool. And then when you tried it, it was like, So, yeah. This camera also does, by the way, 444 in 10-bit or 12-bit in full HD, which has been something people have been asking for a long time as well.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. It also has a 2K mode, so if you want to go a little bit bigger than 1080p.
I still don't understand 2K, to be honest with you. I mean,
okay, if you think about it like UHD and then the true 4K, which is the 4096 by 2160, basically you're doing the exact same thing. So with 1080p, you're sitting at the same resolution, only a quarter of UHD. When you go to 2K, you're basically sitting at half of 4096 2160. So you are a square of that, or you're a square of the other UHD version.
But I'm sorry to. I mean, technically, that's not true.
What do you mean?
I don't
Let me
think
do
it's
some.
true.
I got to get my calculator out here now and do some actual math. But
The thing that gets funny about 1080, it's the number changes, because 1080 is really 1920 by 1080, right?
yes, that's correct.
Okay. What is 2K? 2K is really 2048
Yeah, which is
by
half of
1080.
4096.
Yes, it's half of 4096, but it's just a tiny little bit bigger than 1080 or than full HD,
Yeah, it's a
because
smidge.
it's not double 1080.
No,
It's just a
no.
little bit smidgy bigger. And yes, it's sort of like UHD and quad, all that kind of stuff, but those tend to be a little bit farther apart than 1080 and 2K.
Well, and you're also
This
changing your
really whacked
aspect
out.
ratio as well, because 1080p is like 1.85 to 1, and 2K is like 1.90 to 1. So you're going from like a half step to a full step. I know it's tiny. I
It's a
see you making that
smidge.
little tiny
It's a
pinching thing in there.
smidge.
But it's the same thing with
1.85 to 1.9, that's a smidge.
yeah, and it's the same with UHD to full 4K resolution. UHD is just slightly smaller, 3840 versus 4096. You're only dealing with 100 or so pixels difference in
Right.
size,
Very true.
but that's what it is. They're multiples of
I
each
know.
other. So 2K is multiple of the true 4K, and UHD is a multiple of 1920 by 1080. Why they do
Okay.
that? I mean, I'm sure there's more technical reasons, like some catch that made it easier to do that. But my understanding was that it was partially title safe issues that ended up bringing in 1920 by 1080 into being to begin with, is because they shot in 2K, but then your motion safe and your title safe were just inside of that, as you've seen in the old days where they had the the tracer lines to tell you where to put your titles and how you had overscan and stuff. So maybe that's what's going on here, is it's protection for overscan.
The thing that drives me the most crazy, DJ, and I apologize if I jumped on you on that, is
Oh, no problem.
I have seen so many people say that 2K is so much better than 1080 because it's so much more resolution. And I'm like, no, it's not. I think people think in their heads that 1080, because 2K is twice that, but it's because I mean, the numbers really, because they're not thinking properly, that they think 1080, you get my point. I think it's just, it's not double.
Yeah, what ends up happening, and Mitch is absolutely right, people say 1080p. Well, they're like, okay, 2K, that's 2000. So 2000 is almost twice as much as 1080. Well, that's not correct. 1080 is the lower pixel count of the 1920s. So
it's the
ratio. When they say 2K, they're just shortening it out, because 2K is actually, that's the binary count for 2000. You don't have 2000, you have 2K, 2 kilobits, which is 2048. So, and it's the same with 4K. 4K, that's a digital representation, so it's 4096, double 2K, and you binarily count that out. 1920 by 1080 doesn't fit into the binary count. It fits into the aspect ratio for televisions count. And so then it's like, well, okay. And that also came from the up resolution of, what was it, 720 by 480 was what you shot on regular video cameras back in the old days. And then you take that and you do the math, and that works out to 4 boxes inside of a 1080p, and 1080p works out to 4 boxes inside of a 4K image. So, and as far as being better, you're absolutely right, Mitch. No, there's not that much difference. If you upscale a 1080p image to 2K, you're only taking it up 100 or so pixels, and most people won't even notice. And even people today blow up 720p to 1080p, and it's okay. And we were talking earlier about 4K getting blown up from 1080p footage. Those few extra pixels shooting at 2K versus 1080p is not that big of a difference. It's not even a noticeable difference.
I think the issue.
Now you got me worked up.
Oh, good. I'm glad to get you all worked up. The real confusement, with the new word there, is the fact that 1080 and 720 and 480 were all vertical measurements. right? And suddenly, when we
Yeah.
started talking about Ks, 2K and 4K, we're talking about the horizontal measure. So it's people get confused because the industry switched in the way we quote unquote talk or measure, even though the resolutions are always been X versus Y, right? Width versus height.
Yeah.
We suddenly switched in our terms from talking about height to width without keeping in the same measure. So that's what really has confused many people, which is why 1080 is not double or half of 2K.
Okay, so
Left versus right, or horizontal versus vertical.
pulling us off of that rant / tangent here, going back to the Canon C300 Mark II. One thing I'm wondering about here is we're moving over to the way more expensive CFast compact flash that are super fast cards, and this is a maximum 410 megabit per second codec. What does that work out to as far as data rates go? 120 gig card, you're talking somewhere in the range of what, like $400, $500. So
yeah,
that's maybe going to get you 2 hours worth of shooting at 400 and probably roughly 2 hours. I'm just doing some quick numbers in my head here, but at 200 megs a second on the GH4, you get about 4 hours on 128 gigs. So this would be roughly double that. So now you're talking 2 hours, 128 gigs. Is that going to be feasible for a lot of people as far as data goes?
yeah, you got me, and trying to throw those math numbers at me is like craziness. As a side note, I want to back up just for a second because I just remembered the XC10 is also CFast, and guess what? They're throwing in like a 16 gig CFast card with that, which was kind of impressive.
16 gig?
Okay, maybe it was 64. I don't remember the number. I apologize, and we don't have it in the notes, so I didn't. But they're throwing in a CFast card, so that's kind of nice. That I mean, I've never seen Canon or anybody throw in a compact flash card when you bought the camera. So it's like really you take it out of the box and you shoot with it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking right now just to get the prices on these new CFast cards, and some brands that I've never heard of, like Wise. 128 gig card is going to set you back about $600. So media for both of these is probably going to be, $600. That's what, about a quarter of the cost of the camera for the XC10, right? So, I mean, that's really pretty expensive. Maybe that's why Canon's throwing it in. Maybe they get some kind of bulk discount by buying the cards, and it makes the camera seem like it's more affordable. Because if this is the price for memory for that, man, owning 2 cards, you're halfway there to buying another camera.
Right. Well, like I said, and I apologize, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I swear it was a 16 gig card. So it's probably not one of the big expensive ones like you're talking about. No, it says 64 gig CFast 2 card is included. So
well, that's about a $370 bonus. So
right.
Maybe this would have been a $2,000 camera if they hadn't added the card to it.
Yeah, because they up-res the price on that, like Apple does, right?
Oh, man.
Yeah. Today's Apple Watch Day. Are you getting one?
No, I am not getting an Apple Watch. I am a watchless man. No watches on these arms.
Good for you.
Did you have one, Mitch, or did you get one on pre-order?
I have not. I am actually going to go look at it at the Apple store, not today, but some other time. But I'm curious, really curious to see how it works. But I don't have a watch either on my body. My dad used to drive me crazy. My dad passed almost 20 years ago. It was 20 years ago. And he used to drive me crazy because he's like, "Where's your watch, son?" I'm like, there are clocks everywhere. Why do I need a watch? And now with our phones in our pocket, I mean, that was pre-cell phone, right? With a cell phone in my pocket, I don't need to look at my watch, my wrist for the time. It's right there. But anyway, that's a real sidebar for you.
Yeah, one of the things to think about though with the watches and stuff, and this has kind of become prevalent with cell phones, is that now a lot of cameras can be controlled via your cell phone. So in the future, when they finally decide to get rid of cell phones altogether and cram them into a watch form factor, you may in fact be able to do the Get Smart and look at your wrist and control your camera from a distance. That might also be cool for drone controls and things like that. As far as the Apple Watch goes, this is brand new technology. No one else is really doing it completely awesome. I don't think Apple's going to nail it right away, and we're going to end up waiting for generation 2 or generation 3 before we start seeing stuff that just really rocks our world.
Yep. Same here. I'm not jumping out to buy one right off the bat. I'm going to go see how cool it is. I'm afraid that it's going to be so thick that it's going to just drive me crazy. I'm not looking forward to that. And the second thing I don't like especially is the fact that you got to charge it every night with that clunky charger that they've got. So yet another cable for my cats to chew on.
Isn't that a proprietary cable as well?
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So $75 I lost my cable replacement guide.
Yep.
And you can get the watch in gold for $10,000.
Exactly. That's my second purchase.
All right, rolling on to this next one here. This one's yours, Mitch. Adobe updates Premiere Pro, or plans to update Premiere Pro. Tell me a little bit about this.
Well, you're catching me off this one because I just saw this morning. One of my writers, Karen from Australia, sent me this morning. So I don't know a whole lot about it. I did glance at one of the demos. So the article that I got said that they're coming out with a lot of new things with the Lumetri color, and I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm pulling a DJ, but I don't know if I'm saying that right. Lumetri color panel, Creative Cloud libraries will now work with Premiere Pro. This is the one that I saw. A new effect called Morph Cut will be ending the dreaded jump cut. So there's a demo, and I'll include the link. Which was really cool because I typically do jump cuts in the stuff that I do because I don't want to fool with trying to make things look really pretty and stuff. But so if you're doing a talking head interview, for example, and the guy doesn't move a whole lot, this morph cut will interpolate the pixels in between where he was and where he is between the two cuts, and it looks very seamless. The demo was incredibly sexy.
So is this like a really fancy cross dissolve?
Really fancy cross dissolve, yes, because it's like you don't see there is no virtual cut there. It all looks seamless. Obviously, now, I think it's not going to work if you're standing on one side of the frame and then suddenly you're on the other side of the frame. That I don't think is going to work. But if you're doing, in their example, is a talking head interview where the guy moves his head slightly and it's seamless in between what used to be cuts. So it looks pretty cool.
Now, one of the things I want to say about Adobe's demos is that they always look amazing when you see them on stage. And you're like, I'm going to use the heck out of this. And one of those examples was the Puppet tool and the auto rotoscope tool.
Yeah.
Both of those, when you saw those, you were like, this is great. I'm going to just rotoscope the heck out of this shot. Everything will be fine. Then you get to find out that that was the best case scenario for the particular item that they're demonstrating. And 3/4 of the time, it doesn't perform nearly as good as the demos show it to perform. So keep that in mind when you get really excited about a new Premiere update. They're showing you the best case scenario because they want their product to look awesome. But in reality, Adobe is kind of still working on the item, stuff like that, especially like the rotoscope tool. If you move your hand around, and in this case, I'm on a cheap video camera right here, you can see my hand blurs a little bit. The rotoscope tracking tools weren't good enough to keep up with that sort of thing. So in the demo, you saw these beautiful automatic cutouts and stuff like that. And then in reality, like half the time you're drawing stuff by hand and working around all kinds of crap. I'm guessing this is the same way where they show you something really awesome and maybe 1 out of 4 times it does it, and the other times maybe not so much. Maybe not though. I could be wrong. Well,
like I said, in this particular case, I think the demo was very appropriate because you're talking about a talking head kind of situation. Maybe he stumbles over his words and then you cut back to, you cut out a segment of what he said. And if you can eliminate that visual cut, it will sound more intelligent. I don't think it's going to be very good for people or situations where the subject moves radically, or like you're saying with a hand movement across there. That's, we saw that kind of thing in what's that plugin that you can super slow down stuff?
Oh,
Twixtor. Yeah,
Twixtor.
Twixtor.
Yeah.
That works really great in some situations. In other situations, it just mangles the heck out of everything, and you go, screw that, and walk away. So yeah, it's gonna be applicable in certain scenarios. In other scenarios, it's just gonna bite.
Now, on the other side of the fence, to be positive on Adobe's updates, with the cloud implementation, I've been seeing Premiere Pro, After Effects updates on a monthly and 3-month cycle. That's really nice. And there's so many new features that I'm actually having to subscribe to the video updates in order to find out what's being added and play around with the new tools. And I'm talking to other editors and finding out, like, what? That's available now? When did they add that? Where did this pane come from?
Yeah.
So it's really nice that there is actually that many new things coming to Adobe products. The other thing on this list that you have here, it looks like they're adding support pre-release for the XF AVC codec that's going to be on the C300 and I think on the XC10. So that's nice. Codec support is really good. Also, for new Adobe releases, the new version of Lightroom is coming out here at the end of April, I believe. And so that will add support for the latest range of cameras. But remember, folks, that is 64-bit only. So if you are not on a 64-bit operating system, you are going to be stopped at Lightroom 5.7.
Yeah.
They had to move on forward at some point in the future. Last thing on the list here is...
Let me back up. Is it okay if I go on a tirade?
Go on your tirade now. I just jump forward at a random interval, and I always end up stepping on you. So tell me what you got.
Well, it just drives me crazy. This is, Mitch, is one of my pet peeves, especially true right now with NAB. I register at NAB as a press professional, which could be debated, but let's not go there. I get inundated with press releases in the last 3 weeks. Yeah. And it drives me absolutely bonkers because I want to learn about some of these things. But people who write press releases assume that you know what the hell they're talking about. And it even came, I'll give you an example. One of the companies a couple of years ago put out, and God, now I'm not going to come up with the name, a riser for a slider. And I've forgotten what they called it. And I, not being a guy who shoots movies all day, every day, did not understand the purpose for this riser. But everybody was, the press release, oh, this is amazing. And Joe said it's the best thing since sliced pizza. And I'm like, okay, I don't understand it. And your press release doesn't explain it in terms that I can understand. So a lot of these press releases come out. The ones that really appeal to me are the guys that have a video that go along with it that says, and Adobe does this. I'm very pleased with Adobe, even though it's like the morph cut thing that we were just talking about is a best case possibly. If I read this sentence that says a new effect called morph cut will be and the dreaded jump cut, it doesn't sink into me. I'm a very visual guy, and most of us filmmaker kind of people are. Photographers, we're visual people. Show me what the hell you're talking about and explain it in words that a simpleton like me can understand. And then I'm going to talk about it. If I don't know what it is, I'm hitting the damn delete key. And I have done that so many times, except for the one that I was talking about a few minutes ago that I still haven't gone back and found about the upresing thing. That one was awesome because they gave me visual samples. And I was like, I get it now. So if you're one of those people writing those press releases, make it so Mitch can understand it and you'll get a lot of more credit.
Make it
rant.
short is what I want. I'm looking at a Blackmagic release email that I got this morning, and it's like 20 paragraphs. And this isn't a new camera. Like, I read through the whole thing thinking like, oh, they're releasing a new camera. No, it's an update to the firmware to 2.3. And what they could have done is said firmware update, here's what it adds, and that's it. At NAB this year, Blackmagic has been bringing forward the technology of it. It's like, why are you giving me all this filler stuff when I just need a specs list and the information about whatever it is? Tell me what it is at the beginning, give me the specs list, and then if you want to fill up the entire press release with a bunch of junk, put that at the end where I don't have to look at it. Because, man, I'm not going to read 20 or 30 paragraphs worth of you bragging about how great, Blackmagic's releases have been in the past, and quoting 20 people I don't know saying, yes, this is amazing. Oh, great. This is amazing. Okay. So what if Joe Smo says it's amazing? I've never used it. Like, just tell me what it does. Tell me what it does.
I admire you so much for saying that. It used to be true at Boeing too. When I was at Boeing, one of the things that they loved, one of the buzzwords was to give the manager the 10,000-foot view right at the beginning of a presentation to get him interested in what he could understand. If you're going to do a presentation, give him the overview. Tell him what it's like from looking down on it. What are you going to give him in this new airplane or this new product or whatever? Get him really excited at the beginning, and then go on and give him the details. And that's exactly what you just asked for.
Well, and I'm going to give a few offenders here. Motion VFX, Blackmagic, of course.
Blackmagic. I sent them an email a couple of weeks ago because they put one of those out that you talked about that went on and on and on, and they explained it in such minute detail. I wrote her back and I said, tell me what this thing does in English, please.
Yeah. It's a little bit ridiculous. I have 180 press releases in my inbox right now, and I only have so much time.
Yeah.
And as you can see, I am homeless right now, living in a hotel. So I don't really have time to just sit down and read every single press release. I want the Reader's Digest version. I want it fast. I want it easy. One other thing, and before we wrap up the show, I wanted to ask you about it, if you've seen it or not. DJI has that adapter now for their cameras that is basically like a full-fledged 3-axis stabilizer with the camera all together in one piece. Now, have you seen the hand grip that is in pre-release on B&H? I haven't seen anybody talking about this yet, but it basically screws onto the bottom of that camera that you can buy separately from the Phantom, and allows you to use that camera as a 3-axis stabilizer, as a handheld, full sort of GoPro replacement-esque type of device. And I'm thinking the price is going to be around $599. What do you think about that?
I have not seen that.
Go touch it when you're at NAB. Go touch it.
I think there are going to be quite a few of those kind of adaptations at NAB. We saw a couple of them last year. Shape had one that was a little handheld thing, and I think Lettuce actually has one that they have been producing for a while that's a 4-axis gimbal kind of thing.
Isn't that the one with the rubber band on your back?
Yeah, no, but I've seen those too. Actually, Sebastian from Cinema 5D had one of those last year that had the big, arm over his head with the rubber band on it.
Oh man, those are a little on the goofy side.
Yeah, but if you got to hold one of those cameras for a while, I think that's cool. But it looks really awesome. So I've seen several, like you said, my inbox is flooded with all these press releases, and I've been trying to get through some of them. But there are a lot of people who are applying either 2-axis or 3-axis stabilization to sliders, handheld units. This is kind of the thing for NAB this year. I'm not sure what the big thing is going to be, but you'll find out about it on the live blog that will be hosted on DSLR Film Noob right there up there in the menus. If you go to right next to the news, there is the live blog tab. So make sure all of you viewers go out there to the live blog. I'm not going to pump the Planet 5D one because it's on multiple websites. And so DSLR Film Noob is the place to go. Just go there. We've got 30-something reporters that are going to be working on the show floor, giving you the most up-to-date information. You don't have to wait for some guy like some of the film crews that will have 2 reporters and 3 audio guys and 4 cameras, and then they have to ship the film back to the hotel, and the guy edits it overnight, and then you get to see it on Tuesday. We're going to be doing live updates right there from the show floor, especially at 9:30 Pacific time, which is 12:30 Eastern. The very first day is the Black Magic press conference. We've got several reporters that are going to be sitting there, including me. So updates are going to happen first thing Monday. Actually, some people have already started posting because they're starting to show their trip out to NAB. So if you want to go see that, it's right there in the second tab on DSLR Film Noob's website. DSLR Film. I'm not used to saying your website. I'm used to saying Planet 5D. So sorry.
You can find that awesome news coverage that Mitch is talking about on a number of websites, including mine and Planet 5D. So check that out anywhere it's available. They do a great job. They've got tons of reporters working together to create this great stream. And Mitch has worked really great with the community to gather everybody together and get them all to post in one place so that you don't have to go to 20 or 30 different places to find it. And this post and blog roll is basically available on any website that is working on that with Mitch. So check those out. Those are great. I'm actually going to be reading those because right now I can't make it to NAB. I'm missing out this year. I'm actually holding a small Pomeranian in my hand because it's getting antsy sitting in a motel room. So that was your pick of the week. Mine is just not being homeless. Let me tell you right now, we missed out on our home that we were supposed to be moving into because it got bid out at the last minute. And so instead of moving to a location where I have everything ready to go, my stuff is all still in storage, and I am living in a hotel for possibly the next 2 months until I find a place to live. So it is wonderful up here in Vancouver. Thanks, guys, for buying out my home, you jerks. And yeah, that's about it, really. Mitch, where can people find you?
NABliveblog.com is the other place you can go if you don't want to remember DSLRfilmnoob.com. I'm at Planet 5D, and as well planetmitch.com, where I talk about some of my other projects.
And as usual, guys, you can find me over at DSLRfilmnoob.com. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are delivered, including SoundCloud, iTunes, and so on. I apologize. DSLRfilmnoob.com is not being updated for the next week or so because I am still homeless and still moving, and all my gear is in storage. I do have a video coming up for that Ceramonic audio adapter. I'm going to try and knock that out this weekend because I still have that in my possession. Otherwise, I should be back to normal as soon as I find a home in the next week, 2 weeks. Otherwise, expect headphone podcasts for a little while to come. Thanks again for watching, and Mitch, take us out.
This has been the DSLR Film Noob podcast episode number 21, I believe.
21.
Thanks for being here.
And cut. All right. I'm going to end the live broadcast now. Thanks, everybody, for watching live. That was great.